Adrienne Lanier Seward. She is one of my midwives. She is a woman who, when I was in my 20s, helped me give birth to myself as a Black woman, as a woman of African ancestry. And one of the ways that she did it was to use literature as a portal. And she exposed me to the work of Octavia Butler. And Octavia Butler has become one of my most important muses as a ceramicist. Octavia Butler was this tall Black woman who was shy, who had dyslexia, who was poor, and all she wanted to do was write. But she wanted to write what she wanted to write. And her genre was speculative fiction or science fiction. And what she did is she wrote work that put people of color and people who were defined as other in the future. In a future that white male writers of science fiction had excluded us from. What's most powerful about her work for me is she works with this idea of Sankofa. The Sankofa bird has a seed, which is one's culture, one's heritage. And the Sankofa bird in the present moment looks to the past while flying into the future. The past and the present and the future happen simultaneously, and they're important for the growth and development of humanity. For me, as an artist, materials serve as a metaphor. For me, clay is the paper on which I write. I am very concerned about having a space where I can say and write and be in dialogue with people in a way that empowers me and my audience. Then there is this space called the kiln. As a ceramicist, the kiln can be a kind of scary space. It reminds me of the transatlantic slave trade. It reminds me of the Middle Passage, where we have people from the continent of Africa going out into the entire world as a kind of commodity. And the journey being one where some people got through it, but they were traumatized. Some people got through it, but they were slightly cracked. Some people got through it and were completely shattered. Some people went over the edge of the boats. This is the experience that ceramics has. You can put it in the kiln, it might crack, it might shatter, or it might come out whole. And then there's this idea of the finishes. For me, there are finishes that are glazes where I've got to put the piece back in the Middle Passage. Then there are finishes that I must apply with my hand, whether it's a pencil, a Crayola, wax, an acrylic wash, sometimes shoe polish. But the whole idea of touching the piece is a part of the writing. And then there's this idea of diaspora. Diaspora meaning this whole idea of the spread or the dispersal of seeds originally for the Greek. But when we talk about people, we're talking about a dispersal of people around the world. In my work, cowrie shells are significant. They speak to femininity, they speak to protection, they speak to abundance, they speak to this idea of looking at the world from the seen and the space of the unseen. Then I use Akwaba figures. We think of Akwaba figures, these West African figures, as a fertility figure, this idea of helping women to bring more people on the planet. But I use the Akwaba as a way to remind myself and remind my viewers that they are on this planet to give birth to themselves, to bring their contribution to humanity, to all of us. And then finally, there are Adinkra symbols. The beauty of Adinkra symbols is they have their own kind of aesthetic, and with each symbol there is a proverb and also a simplistic meaning. So just for this evening, we're going to work with a little funky math, okay? Just for this evening, 2 plus 1 equals 5. We're going to look at 2 of Octavia Butler's novels, 1 of her short stories, and 5 pieces of artwork that I have done. The first piece is called Sun Woman, and it's inspired by her novel, Wild Seed. We all have that novel that if we were stranded on an island, we'd want to have with us for comfort. My novel is Octavia Butler's Wild Seed. Here we have a woman who is somewhere in her 30s, at least she appears that way, but she's actually 300 years old. And in this piece, the Adinkra symbol that speaks to the idea of the Queen Mother is on her forehead. Why? Because she is extremely committed to her family, to her community, and protecting them. And how does she protect them? She understands the art and science of being a shapeshifter. She can change her shape to any animal she chooses to. She is so committed to protecting her family, particularly against her spirit partner, who many of us would say is a negative spirit, that she will transform herself into a white man to make sure her children are okay. The next novel that I think is crucial is Parable of the Sower. And the beauty of this novel is we have a 15-year-old girl who's growing up in a dystopic, a chaotic society, and she is committed to making sure humanity flourishes. And she does it by creating her own belief system, Earth Seed. In this piece, I have pulled on Adinkra symbols that speak to being fearlessness, to recognizing that you are always in the presence of the divine, and also understanding that sometimes a seed must wait until it's in the right soil before it can grow. Now, as an anthropologist reading Octavia's short stories, I have chosen near of kin. And this is my notation, a kinship chart. The key to the story, from my lens, is the relationship between the male, that is the red triangle, and the red aquaba figure. Part of what I work on, aside from masks, is looking at the idea of transforming clay into quilts. The first quilt you will see is called Ask Just Once. And it's this whole idea that this young woman who has been in her first year of college is coming to grips with her mother's death and going through her mother's things. But there is something that hangs heavy in the air, and it's at the center of the family. The soft rectangle represents, the soft triangle represents her father. And he is full of love for the circle that is her mother. And in the center of that is the young woman. But here's what she comes to understand. She takes one moment in her life, takes a risk, and asks her father the truth of what she suspects. She says to him, "You know, I look a lot like you as opposed to my mother." Now, she's grown up knowing this man as her uncle. But when she asks the question, he claims her as her father. And sometimes in the fabric of family, we have to confront those difficult, painful issues so that we can give birth to ourselves. In this next quilt, the father has taken a picture of 3 generations of women, the grandmother, the mother, and the daughter. And he has done it on a day that was the best day of their lives. He has captured them in a positive moment to remind his daughter that there were some good times. And then finally, we have to think about the mother's legacy. This mother, represented by the Aquaba figure in the center of this quilt, she was not perfect. But what she did do is she left a legacy for her daughter. She left her with cowrie shells, which represent money that she wanted to make sure she had. She also left her with land in Oregon and Arizona because she wanted to make sure that wherever she was in the world, she knew she had some place to go and she had resources on which she could count on. I find Octavia Butler's work freeing. She gives me the power to write like I like to write. I like to write as an artist through clay. I like to tell stories in my work that link to other stories. Stories that might call for women folk to shapeshift to protect family and community. For women folk to support teenage women who will ultimately be the one to take care of humanity. And to think about asking the painful, difficult questions that will allow us to give birth to ourselves so that generations of people can once again experience joy and in some way to embrace the legacy that we leave each other from generation to generation. Octavia Butler says, "Every story I create creates me. I write to create myself." It's time that we all take a moment and think about what's bottled inside and have the courage to write the way we write so that we can open up and show the world who we are. Thank you. Thank you.